Welcome to the show today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have one or two really special episodes we're going to share with you. The first being today. Today, as of this recording, we are at Godspeak Calvary Chapel. These are you guys who listen to the podcast. You know that's my home church in Thousand Oaks, California, with the brave Pastor Rob McCoy. And we're hosting a Vodi Bakum Wrath and Grace Conference today with Owen Strain, the New Testament professor out of Arkansas, who's just absolutely fire. Vodi Bakum, David Benham, who's here in studio with me today, and myself talking about confronting the culture, coming against those who would appease this culture of death and say that there's no role for the church to contend politically in the public for righteousness and to restrain evil. And so we had the opportunity to sit down here now with David Benham of the Benham Brothers dynamic duo, who's here to talk about all things Jesus, all things Christianity, all things pro-life, and the role of the church in the culture of death. So, David, honor to have you here, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah,
I got to hear you for the first time in person. I've heard you before, but in person is way more effective. I just loved it because you're shaking your head and you're like grabbing the microphone, and I loved it, man. You're absolutely on fire.
We're physical beings, and that's why I was like, we need to do a little recording together.
That's
because
so good.
I don't want to Skype you in. You're here, let's talk. And so for those of you guys who don't know, the Benham Brothers, okay, you guys, HGTV, right, and then baseball players, and now just marketplace believers contending for the faith. But for those of you guys who don't know, the Benham Brothers, David Benham being here with us now, have a long history of robust pro-life engagement that goes back to your father and your family. For the people who don't know that, why don't you share a little bit about that?
So Jason and I, my identical twin brother, I'm 2 minutes older, and he and I grew up in Dallas, Texas. I always got to let people know that. We grew up in Dallas, Texas, and our dad was a pastor. And our dad would say that if your theology isn't your biography, your theology is worthless.
Wow.
It's pretty awesome.
That's good.
So, and that's really where we've kept it, is we keep the theology in the church house, but we don't live it out as biography in the marketplace.
Wow.
And so our dad put his office next to the busiest abortion facility in Dallas.
Intentionally.
And
what was his business?
Well, he was a pastor, and then he was also very, very passionate about being a pro-life pastor in terms of mobilizing the church to help these mothers who felt they had no other choice but abortion.
And your father's name is Flip Benham?
Flip Benham. And so he put his office there, and they began ministering to the workers at the abortion clinic. They would send cookies over, and then one of the workers would go out and sit on the bench out in the parking lot, and she'd smoke. And Dad used to be a chain smoker and an alcoholic, and before he got saved, and so he would go out there and just befriend this one clinic worker, and it just turned out that it was Norma McCorvey, who was Jane Roe of Roe v. Wade. He did not know that.
He didn't know that.
He did not know that. When he put his office next to that clinic, he did not know that she was one of the workers.
Because she started working in the abortion industry.
She did after all
Roe,
of it,
right?
exactly.
That's right.
Yep, which was all a big lie. She was used and abused.
She said that.
She 100%. And
what was that lawyer's name who really preyed
Faye,
upon? Faye Waddleton was
Faye
the president
Waddleton.
of Planned
It
Parenthood,
was
but Wendy,
right?
Was that her name?
Yeah. I can't remember. Okay,
that hungry liberal lawyer in Texas.
100%.
They were looking.
They abused her
on the hunt for a vulnerable woman who they could use as the plaintiff in a case that would federalize abortion.
And
the national level.
I remember Norma and her lesbian partner sitting at our dinner table.
No
now this is, I'm fast forwarding the story,
do?
obviously, but of course.
How
Connie.
old were you?
Yeah, I was 15.
Wow.
And I remember Norma's like, they all lied. It's nothing but a lie. This was after. So, by the way, let me back up and just say that my dad befriended her, and then after, about a year, it's funny because she loved the Beach Boys. He loved the Beach Boys. And so she knew who he was.
Okay.
She called him Flip Venom with a V.
No way.
But Dad was, this is what's interesting. She had a book called I Am Roe. I think that was the name of the book.
Yeah.
Okay. And back in the day before social media, she had a book signing, and that's when the news would show up, and she was at a bookstore.
Sure.
And there were the news crews there, and there were, a handful of people out there in the parking lot. And my dad said, I felt like I needed to go. And so he went.
And they were friends at this point?
They were acquaintances.
Just from the business being next door?
Yes, But she would still kind of talk a little junk to him, but there was almost a little bit of a friendliness.
Wow.
And so my dad was standing in the back, and when she was announced to come to the speaker to kind of kick off this book and explain it, he just said something came over him. Now, we know it was the Holy Spirit, but something came over him, and he said, and I said, as soon as she stepped up to the podium, I said very loudly, Norma McCorvey, how dare you desecrate the bodies of millions of unborn babies by selling a book? And she, in her story, I remember when she told me, she said, I hated your dad at that. She was visibly shaken when he said that. The words sunk deep into her heart. And I remember she's
not pro-life at this point?
No, not at this point. This is before she had even converted to the Lord.
Wow.
And so my dad, later on, after she had already given her heart to Christ, she was telling my brother and I, she's like, when your dad said that to me, she said that was the point. It was at that point I knew I was wrong.
No way.
She said I had been waffling for years. And she said, but when he said that to me, I knew that I was wrong.
No way.
And it took her a little bit longer. I don't know the exact amount of time. And that's when she finally told my dad, I'm ready to give my heart to Christ.
Because David, what a lot of squishy Christians would say is the appease the culture kind of Christians, right? That's what we're talking about today at this conference, confronting the culture versus appeasing the culture. The appease the culture Christian leaders would say, David, that wasn't very Christian-like of your
winsome.
dad.
They use the word winsome.
They love the word winsome, right?
Yeah,
that's not very winsome, David, of your dad, because that kind of harms the Christian witness because you're being very bombastic and offensive to say something like that. Why couldn't he have just said, Norma, Jesus loves you
and has a wonderful plan for your life.
Babies, and you should come to Christ. It just goes to show that, like, when the Spirit of the Lord moves you to say something, to stand in the gap, to speak life, sometimes it's not going to be sunshine and rainbows. Sometimes it's going to be salt, and sometimes 100%. Salt hurts.
Well, and here's the balance.
But God used it. I mean,
so growing up in this movement, I see that in the battle between good and evil, there are the enslaved and the enslavers. The enslaved are 98.5% of the people that you come in contact with.
Wow.
They don't need some public rebuke. They don't need, they just need, they need that compassion, but the truth.
That's
right? They need the truth spoken in love. Now, the enslavers, those are the ones that Jesus, I mean, how many times have you seen a pastor call someone a snake? You know, it's one thing to be, that's right. It's one thing to be a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Right.
It's another thing to be a wolf in shepherd's clothing.
Whoa.
And so, and I heard that somewhere. I can't take credit for that, but it's true.
Whoa.
We have wolves in shepherd's clothing taking positions of leadership in the church and in our government. They do not need winsomeness. They need to be rebuked. Now, Dad, at this point, had never rebuked Norma. He had always been winsome with her and very compassionate, reaching out to her, ministering to her. But when she decided to sell the book and in front of the press was going to talk about this story, that's when Dad knew, you will enslave people and I will rebuke it. Wow. That's a very easy grid for us as Christians, even to see in Christ's life. When those enslavers were taking ground, he drove them out. Now, they always had time to repent. Nehemiah came quietly at night, you know, and he was one of those leaders. Yeah. And so, anyway, it was an important lesson in my life when I would see Norma. But then here's what's interesting. She gets baptized. It becomes national story.
That's right. And when was that?
That was, oh gosh, I was 17, 18. It must have been in the mid-90s.
So slowly but surely,
I will screw
God's
this up.
Working on Norma's heart.
100%.
Through your dad's faithfulness.
Through my dad's faithfulness.
And there is a famous picture of her being baptized.
Yes, there's
who baptized Norma McCorvey of Roe versus Wade?
That was Flip Benham, my dad. It was funny because he was wearing my denim shirt and Jason's tie. We still get on to him about that. He comes running in because literally Nightline, which was Ted Koppel back in the day, I'm dating myself, they were all like, it was live.
Wow.
And they were there at the swimming pool, and Dad's like, I need a shirt and a tie. So he came and got our stuff, of course. But the story that most people don't know is that Dad told my brother and I, we've got to go rent a U-Haul trailer because we got to move her out of Connie's house. They can't, this is unrighteous.
Her lesbian partner.
Yeah, they were her lesbian partner. And Miss Connie, I mean, it really was hard on her. But she saw this change in Norma's life, and I remember when Connie got saved, and Dad sent my brother and I to Walmart to buy a blow-up swimming pool so he could baptize her. Yeah, it was an amazing. It was just so awesome.
Right. I haven't heard that story.
As a teenage kid, I saw the power of the gospel to soften the hardest hearts. I saw a way that you are, like, our family would minister at local abortion clinics, and my dad would always say, it's one thing to be against abortion, it's another thing to be pro-life.
Right.
And we would have these mothers into our home, and we would see I would watch the tears on this young mother's eyes where she's like, I don't even know who the dad is. I don't even know what to do.
Right.
And I would see a family in our church say, hey, ma'am, we'll help you. You know, and then this whole narrative that the church doesn't love the born. They only have a love affair with the unborn. I'm like, you're just hiding behind that because you don't want to get involved.
That's right.
Anyway, I watched this.
Wow.
And so when my brother and I finally, fast forwarding our story, we played pro baseball. I was with the Red Sox, Cardinals, Jason, Baltimore Cardinals, and Baltimore Orioles, and then Cardinals,
Right.
not the Baltimore Cardinals. Anyway, so and then we got out and started businesses, and we landed this HGTV reality show. I'll never forget. They, behind closed doors, said there is an agenda that will try to vilify your family for this, but we're going to stick with you guys. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about that story here in just a little bit on another episode. So you got to have me come back because we don't have time. But I do remember one of the executive producers asking me, you guys are really vocal about your whole pro-life position. I think that's pretty cool. I mean, a lot of people, we believe like you guys do.
Wow.
But he said, but we're going to be putting you in front of millions of people. And you're probably going to get a lot of kickback, and so are we at HGTV. Would you guys consider dialing it back a little bit? You know, and that was a real temptation. And I'm sitting here like, this is our heritage.
Whoa.
I see life. Like, these preborn children are being torn apart, and these mothers are feeling they're boxed into a corner like they have no choice. Yeah. And yet, am I willing to sacrifice all of that so I can have a reality show? So I can make millions? Whoa. So I can be famous?
Wow, bro.
And Jason and I had to cross that bridge, and thank God we were able to stand strong. But there was a real temptation for the love of money, and I felt as the most powerful urge I ever had with money and influence and fame. That's the most powerful I've ever had in my personal life of sacrificing my values. It was a real temptation, but I'm thankful for the community of Christians that I had around me. I had a dad, but I also had a very vocal pastor. I also had not only my twin brother, but I had other buddies in my life that were men with chests. And I knew if I back away, I'm going to get buggy whipped. They're going to smack me around. And that's so good for a man to have.
So good. You know, the thought I just had, David, was, you know, the left is really good at that. They're really good at their accountability of morality. Now, we would understand it to be vice and not virtue. But my point is that they hold their own accountable to walk the secular progressive line. Yes. They have expectations. This is the whole idea of cancel culture, right?
Yes.
You need to promote leftism, and you need to decry conservatism or a Judeo-Christian worldview. And so there's almost more of a religious accountability for leftism in the marketplace, in the public square, than there is for accountability for righteousness within the walls of the church.
You nailed that.
And doesn't that tell us everything we need to know about this current cultural and political moment and the silence of the shepherds?
Okay, I'm so glad you said silence of the shepherds, because I was going to go to John chapter 10, where Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. How do you know he's a good shepherd? He said, I lay my life down for the sheep. And then he said, when a wolf shows up to scatter the flock, to devour and scatter the flock, a hireling runs. And he says he runs because he doesn't care about the sheep. Who's he care about? He cares about himself.
That's right.
And that is what we are seeing. There are three things that the hireling pastors of America have sold the flock for: their income, their image, and their influence. Those are the idols of today's modern pastors.
3 eyes, huh?
Thank God for the Jack Hibbs and the Rob McCoys. And I thank God and there are literally thousands of faithful shepherds, but now it's the celebrities that have been given a platform. And instead of having a platform to use it to beat back the wolves, they've got the platform to shine the light on themselves. Their income, their image, and their influence have become the idols that have kept not only them enslaved, but it has allowed the wolves of this culture that rob, kill, and destroy, stealing identity, taking even the, I tell people, I grew up in the most pro-choice family known to man. We were giving choices to these vulnerable mothers every single day that they were coming up to the clinic. That's multiple choices. I know you're struggling with your rent. Well, let's do this. Oh, well, okay, so you guys are considering marriage, but not really. Okay, sir, you need to man up here because you have impregnated her, and this is your responsibility. You can't leave her. You're right. We're giving them all these choices. Accountability. And we just, thousands and thousands and thousands of mothers have chosen life, and it's not just them that have chosen life. To this day, my daddy's 74. He's still faithful at the local abortion clinics, ministering in Charlotte, North Carolina. And there are countless people that have come up to him, pulled over to the side of the road, and said, 30 years ago, Dallas, Texas. 22 years ago, Tupelo. 14 years ago, Charlotte, North Carolina. I mean, I'm telling you, this is what my dad. One time,
what a legacy.
For his birthday, I think it was his 70th birthday, his former secretary and some of the workers put together a collage of faces. And it was all children. It makes me emotional even thinking about it. It's just amazing. It's like, nobody knows Flip Benham. He's not a mega church pastor. He's never gotten a spray tan a day in his life. He doesn't wear Yeezys. I mean, he doesn't. He would get upset if you had fog blowing on the stage with him. He's never had that.
Wow.
But he has a legacy that I know at the marriage supper of the Lamb. He'll be sitting there and having a story to tell. And that's the stuff that burns in the heart of his kids.
That's right.
His boys, my brother and I. That's the stuff. It's not how cool my dad was.
Yeah.
It's not how winsome he was with people. It's not how much money he had. It wasn't the car he drove.
Right.
It was the Lion of the tribe of Judah that roared inside of him, that roared against the wolves that would devour people, and it also shepherded and took good care of those that were the most vulnerable.
Wow. And it is a lion that prowls around looking for people to devour. And when you talk about a biblical view of abortion, that is it right there. If we had spiritual eyes, David, for spiritual principalities at work, I believe we would see demons in the rooms of abortion centers.
100%.
And so, but your dad understood that and lived according to that reality.
That's right.
Rather than the silent shepherds or the shepherds who have become wolves, right? We're talking about transgenderism. You can be whatever you want. Well, they had a transspeciesism. They became wolves.
That's exactly right.
And are preying on the most vulnerable. And yet, your dad, not a big church, not a big platform, but he was obedient.
That's exactly right.
And look at the fruit from that.
And he got his boys. And he got his.
As we wrap up, David, and we'll have you back on, why don't you just tell people in 30 seconds about what is Benham Brothers?
Yep.
And then where can people connect with you?
So Benham, Benham, Benham Brothers on Instagram. It's on Facebook. I mean, on all the socials, and then our website. And we also do coaching. We train marketplace entrepreneurs on how to utilize their God-given responsibility to take ground in culture. We call it building a bulletproof business.
That's awesome. Wonderful.
It's called expert ownership.
We need more of that, and I'll end with this because the left does that really well. They assert their financial and cultural influence in the marketplace to demand adherence to the liberal regime, the secular progressive religion, and all of its creeds and demands. But where is the Christian witness in the marketplace using their financial and cultural influence for righteousness?
Let me tell you where they are now.
Benham Brothers.
That's exactly right.
That's it. I love it.
There are thousands of them, and Jason and I are doing our best to fan the flames.
So
and instead of being like candles in the church, we're like coals.
Oh,
and the more the wind blows, the hotter we're getting.
That's awesome.
And we're going to see a move of God in the church, and it'll come through the marketplace.
That's powerful. That's it. That's it, David. Thanks for coming on, brother.
Thanks, man.
Thank you guys for joining the show today. What a gift. We'll have David, and we'll get the twin brothers on here sometime, Benham Brothers. Thanks for tuning in. If you want to support the show, head on over to patreon.com/unaborted to support the show. If you want to book me for an event or connect with me in my newsletter and speaking events, go to sethgruber.com. We'll put the show notes for the Benham Brothers. Connect with them. If you're a businessman, if you have influence and you want to start being courageous in the marketplace, you'll definitely want to connect with the Benham Brothers and all that they do at Expert Ownership, I believe.
Yep, you got it. Expert Ownership.
We'll put all the links to that. Thanks for joining the show today, guys. We'll see you next week. I'm Seth Gruber, and this is UnAborted.